Today on Inside the Outside, we're going to be exploring the karst topography of Western Virginia. We're going to have a lot of great volunteers and professionals who are going to join us and explain to us just why karst is so important to our everyday lives. So stay tuned, Inside the Outside is next. Today we're being joined by Will Orndorff, who is a geologist for DCR's Natural Heritage Program. And Will's quite an expert on karst topography in the area, and he's going to tell us a lot about it today. How are you doing, Will?
Good, Greg. How's it going?
Great.
We're out here today in Craig County, about an hour west of Roanoke, and we're on the farm of Frank Sizer. And Frank's one of several private property owners out here, farmers who have the challenges of a special type of topography that we've got here in Virginia, which is karst topography. Now, a lot of you folks have probably heard about caves and exploring caves in the area, and caves are just part of a bigger landscape which is called karst. If you look out here behind me, Greg, you can see some landscape features. Do you notice the depressions up here on the hillside?
Yeah, there's several.
Yeah, there's one here, there's another one back here behind me, and these large forms look kind of like craters or something, as if, you know, there'd been meteor impacts or something, but that's not how these features form. What we're looking at here are sinkholes. You know, a lot of people usually think of sinkholes as something that's formed recently, when there's a collapse in the street, or you hear about them on I-81 or something. But there's pre-existing natural sinkholes that are formed in the geologic past. And in the Roanoke area, you know, to west, south, north of Roanoke, anywhere west of the Blue Ridge, the valleys have a lot of bedrock called limestone. And that's the rock you see exposed here in the field. If you look at the bedrock that you see here, Greg, this is limestone. And limestone was laid down on the bed of an ancient seafloor millions of years in the past. This particular limestone that's exposed here in Craig County, about 460 million years old. So it's a long time ago when this was deposited. And at that time, this part of the world was actually south of the equator and at sea level. So it's come a long way during the mountain building. What's interesting about it from this karst perspective, though, is if you look here, you can see where the rock has been eroded away, or more properly dissolved away by acidic water. This is the exact same thing you see underground in the cave. This feature we see right here could be thought of as a roofless cave passage that's been exhumed by erosion. And what happens here is, instead of the water running off, it simply finds these cracks and it goes down. Now, as we'll see later, and I know you've been in caves before, when you're in a cave and you see water dripping in from the ceiling, that water is coming from these places on the surface. What happens is the water dissolves limestone up here, and then when it reappears in the cave, it deposits the limestone back. So it's taking material and moving it from rock into cave formation. In limestone areas, we tend to have large springs. And what we've discovered is that over time, the water that collects in the caves all coalesces in these underground streams and reappears at the surface at springs. A lot of the colonial age homes and things and different facilities were built around these springs, and they were really economically very important during the time this area was settled. Some of these springs still have some economic importance to this day. For instance, there's a spring out at Paint Bank still serves the state fish hatchery that's out there. So they're important features.
Wow, well, it looks like the bottom fell out of this sinkhole. What happened here?
Well, Greg, that's actually literally what did happen. And a lot of times when the sinkhole bottoms fall in, maybe 1 out of every 50 or 100 sinkholes that happens, and you get an actual entrance into a cave. Now, a lot of the caves in Virginia, there's over 4,000 documented caves, but a lot of them have pretty illustrious names. We have names like Stomp Bottom and Smoke Hole and things like that. Well, this particular one is one of 2 caves in the Roanoke area known as Murder Hole. So you can imagine how that cave got its name. The legend is back in the 19th century there were traveling salesmen that would come through with snake oil, etc.
Okay.
And occasionally these people would be criminals, or they'd be taking liberties they shouldn't be taking with family members, things like that. And the caves got some cultural use, hence the name Murder Hole.
So the farmers would just trussel them up and carry them on out?
Well, that's the legend.
Okay, how far down is the entrance right below us?
Okay. Well, behind us here there's a pit, and this pit's about 65-foot drop into a cave. And then you go off a cave passage, and eventually leads to some more pits. The total depth of the cave below where we're standing right now is probably about 300 feet. And once you get down there, you actually get to that underground stream that I was talking about later that these sinkholes feed into.
Okay.
Another neat thing about this area and about any of these karst areas near Roanoke is that within the caves, there are animals that live in these caves that don't live anywhere else. There's an animal called the Newcastle Murder Hole cave amphipod, which is a little crustacean about 1 centimeter long that's been discovered in this cave about 15, 20 years ago.
When you say a crustacean, you mean like a crawdad? Or?
Right, like a crawdad or a lobster,
Okay.
but this is a freshwater version. You might see them at springs, people call them scuds, and
Okay.
some folks may be familiar with that. But in the caves, they're blind, they have no pigment at all, you can see right through them, and they live strictly in the cave environment, nowhere else. And what's interesting, it seems like each little set of caves or each karst area has its own set of animals that adapted for life in that area and don't exist anywhere else.
And I guess, this area, you talk about the crustaceans, but there's got to be other things there. Everybody thinks about bats and other small mammals. What else would live in this sort of cave system?
Well, bats are a really good point. In fact, we'll go to a cave here in a little while, or go by one, where there's actually a place where the Indiana bat, which is a very uncommon bat, a federally protected bat, lives. And within Virginia, we have about 7 or 8 bat species that live in Virginia's caves. Most of them are pretty common species, and people don't think too much of them. Now, the value of bats, of course, is at night these bats come out of the cave and they eat insects.
Yeah, someone told me they eat like 10,000 a piece per night.
Oh, yeah,
Is that right?
it's a huge number. And they're the only natural predator for night-flying insects. So when people see bats and they're scared and they have the legend of, bats getting in your hair or bats causing problems, it's not a problem. The only thing bats in Virginia eat are insects. There's nothing else that they eat. Bats in Virginia are insectivorous animals. There's a bat right now, look. See if you can get that.
Oh yeah, there he is flying. Huh. Very cool. Isn't that unusual for him to be out in the daytime, Will?
Not really.
Really?
It's he's right near the entrance,
Okay.
and it's getting near hibernation time. So these bats do something called fall swarming. And if you look at it, he's feeding. He's going around grabbing bugs.
Yeah, he's grabbing all the little bugs that are there.
And not with that behavior. That's pretty good bat behavior right there.
Yeah. So are they just trying to pack on some extra fat for the winter like mammals and other mammals would do?
Right, exactly.
Huh.
When bats enter torpor in the winter, their fat reserves have to last for about 4 months.
So Will, there's obviously water coming out here right beneath the road, but there's no stream. Where exactly is this water coming from?
Well, water is always a problem in limestone areas like this, Greg, because the water flow is all underground, like we discussed, going through the sinkholes. A lot of times people would build houses, though, on the edge of the valley, like this house you see up behind us, because at the edge of the limestone there'd be springs at the base of the mountain slope. This particular watering trough here is being fed by a spring up behind the house, and it's piped here. Once it flows through the trough, however, it enters back to the natural drainage, which flows down here into a sinkhole. and it just makes another disappearing or another sinking stream that helps feed the karst system. So let's take a walk down here and we'll see where this water's going.
Okay. So this is where the water from that trough is coming.
That's right, Greg. It comes down this channel, and it's been dry lately, so some of it's actually probably flowing beneath the bed of the channel right now. But it gets down here and it flows into this sinkhole. During a storm event, you can imagine the amount of water that flows down here, and you can see pieces of sandstone that have made it all the way from the ridge top down here into the cave system. Well, you can see there's actually two signs over here, Greg. The sign on top says the cave is protected by Virginia state law. And in 1979, there was actually a Virginia Cave Protection Act that was passed by the General Assembly. And what that Cave Protection Act does, it makes it illegal to deface caves, it's illegal to break formations or remove formations, and it's illegal to do any kind of scientific work or collecting in a cave unless you have the appropriate permits. The idea is that the caves in Virginia house all kinds of special resources that have been protected from effects outside of caves, archaeological resources, biological resources, and just the sheer beauty that people associate with commercial caves. So the Cave Protection Act is designed to protect these resources for their own sake and also for the enjoyment of future generations. The sign underneath is a less common sign. Cave Protection Act applies to all caves in Virginia, but the sign that says closed to all entry is one that's reserved for certain caves, like this one that houses federally protected species. In this case, this cave has a winter population of the Indiana bat. Now, Indiana bats are bats that are found initially in Indiana as their concentration, but there's several Indiana bat caves in Virginia. Indiana bats have been on the decline since the 1960s, 1970s due to pesticide use, and they're making a tenuous recovery. But one of the biggest ways to harm Indiana bats is to disturb the hibernacula, the places where they spend the winter. So what this sign says, and you can't see it's kind of worn out there below, but during part of the year, nobody's allowed in this cave because that's when the bats are hibernating.
Oh man, well this sinkhole's totally full of junk. I mean, where did all this come from? We're sort of in the middle of nowhere.
Well, this is unfortunately one of the land use practices in karst that's been very common over history. You know, a lot of times these karst areas are far away from the cities, and they're fairly rugged terrain, as we've seen. So over the years, people had to find a place to get rid of their unwanted belongings, their trash, dead cows, things like that. And unfortunately, sinkholes were a very convenient place to put that material. And if you're a farmer out and you had a big field with a couple of sinkholes in it, you were really killing two birds with one stone by dumping your trash in there. You could dump your trash, you could also eventually fill in the sinkhole, cover it with soil, and turn it back into productive land. Unfortunately, as we know today, such dumps like these can also introduce contaminants into the groundwater and hurt water quality and habitat. About 5 years ago, the state of Virginia actually started a program where landowners can get money through the state to help clean up sinkhole dumps.
Great.
And they'll come out and look at your site and they'll say, well, okay, it's approved, and then you incur the expenses and then work with the folks at the Soil and Water District to get reimbursed. And you get reimbursed up to about 80% of what you put into it.
Now, Will, we've talked a lot about how there really isn't a lot of surface flow with karst, but obviously here we found ourselves a stream. Where's this water coming from?
No, Greg, we have a saying in karst, and the saying is, what goes down must come up. All that water, if it just kept going underground, would just pond up and eventually be on the surface. What happens instead is it finds its way out through the caves and through fractures in the rock to springs. And many of the biggest springs, in fact, most of the big springs in Virginia, are really just cave systems returning to the surface. In some places where we have springs like this coming out of caves, you can actually get into the cave. You can go in, there's a little air space, and you can come into caves, sometimes up to several miles long. In this particular case, however, the cave is completely flooded. Now, this cave that feeds this spring actually is big enough that a scuba diver about 15 years ago actually dove in here. He was able to penetrate the cave a couple of 100 feet until he got to a point where he could no longer go. But all that was underwater. And it's, of course, an extremely dangerous practice to do cave diving or spring diving. But we know for sure that these springs are connected back to those cave systems. The way, other than a direct connection like that we know that this area connects to those sinkholes is through the use of something called dye tracing. During dye tracing, what we'll do is we put a fluorescent dye in the ground. It's a harmless material, approved for use in water supplies. We put it in the ground where the water runs in, and then we go places like this spring and we put charcoal packets in. And the dye will get picked up on the charcoal if it comes through, and it verifies that the water entering the ground at one location came out at a spring like this. A lot of times we'll use dye tracing techniques, what we call breakthrough curves, to determine just how the water is behaving underground. We can put in samplers and take samples ever so often, and we can tell, up to the hour how long it took from the time the dye was put in the ground at a sinkhole miles away till the time that it shows up here at the spring. The big value of that, for instance, suppose we had an oil spill on interstate or on Route 42 up the road here. We want to know where to go to collect that oil before it damaged surface streams, and also how long we had to get the collection material out. So there's a very practical application for those results.
We're here with Marion McConnell, who is the president of the Blue Ridge Grotto, and they're going to be taking us into a cave today. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're really in for?
Well, I want to dispel one myth really quick. We are going caving. A lot of people like to say the word spelunking. We are not spelunkers, we're cavers, and we're going to take you underground. We have a saying, cavers rescue spelunkers.
Okay.
Cavers wear the proper equipment, and we're going to focus on safety and conservation. So safety-wise, we've left a callback. We've let someone know which cave we're going in and what time we'll call them. And it's important to know which cave because there are over 4,400 known wild caves just in the state of Virginia. So we've left a callback, and we have permission from the owner, and that's another very important part. A lot of people around here may have caves on their property. We always get permission.
Yeah, I noticed there's actually a gate over the entrance. Who actually maintains the gate keys?
In this case, the owner, not a caver, just a property owner, has the keys. We call up, get permission, and he lets us borrow the key. Unfortunately, caves usually have to be gated to protect them from vandalism and keep people safe. We don't want people going in there who aren't prepared, who don't know what they're doing. And the gates have to be critter friendly. They have to be built so the bats can fly in and out, and the little pack rats and the creatures can get in and out of the cave. The very first thing I have to say about safety is your brain. You have to go with some people who can show you what to do and who know the ropes, so to speak. But as far as actual gear, you always want to wear what we call a brain bucket or helmet that's actually made for caving. You want to have a helmet mounted light. Some of the older cavers still use carbide like miners, but most of us these days use the LED that are run on batteries. Most of us cavers, we like to wear coveralls that can stand up to crawling around and climbing and stuff. And knee pads, not necessary, but very highly recommended because you do a lot of crawling. You want to wear good lug sole, high top boots on your feet. Take a pack. We have food and water. The reason we're so protective of newcomers, though, is to make sure you don't get hurt to start with in the cave. So if you're careful and watch where you're walking, the #1 cause of accidents in a cave is a fall. And the most common injury is to break your leg, because a cave is it's not handrails and steps and sidewalks and well lit like a commercial cave. It's an obstacle course. So you want to make sure you're moving through the cave slowly, lowly, and work as a team. We do what's called spotting.
We've talked a lot about caves and karst topography and how they're formed, but now we're going to get to the real fun of it. We're going to actually go into a cave. So let's go on and join the club. All right, we're in the entrance cave. Marion, why don't you, while everyone's getting ready to go, why don't you tell us a little bit about the formations in here?
Okay, well, most formations in Virginia are, of course, we're in limestone, which you talked about, the karst region, and they're created out of calcite. And the beginnings of formations that come from the ceiling are normally called soda straws. They actually look like little drinking soda straws. And when they build up more calcite, they get bigger and become stalactites. Stalac with C for ceiling because they hang down from the ceiling. We may see some later that are stalagmites that come up from the ground. One of the reasons, unfortunately, we have to gate caves is they're very fragile. Caves are a non-renewable resource, and they can be broken, and people will come in and break them off and take them for souvenirs. And that's actually against the Virginia Cave Protection Law. So we want to make sure when we're moving around, we stay nice and low, we don't break any off accidentally with our head, and that we respect the cave environment, because once they're broken, they'll never grow back the same again.
Is it true that the oils in our hands will actually stop them from growing as well?
Yes, so if you can move through the cave without touching any formations, that's the way you want to move. Now, if it's life or death, and if you're going to die if you don't grab that stalagmite, then if you have to, you have to. But we try not to touch any of the formations. We certainly don't bang on them to make them sound like pipe organs or anything like that. We try to move very, like the NSS motto says, you take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, and kill nothing but time. So that's a cam. It will only move up the rope, not down. So he's setting that as a safety while he gets on his rack. His racks is what he's going to use to rappel. He's going to weave the rope in and out the bars of the rack, and the friction of the rope going through those bars is what makes him be able to adjust his speed, how fast or slow he goes. The same cams he'll use to climb up the rope. So they slide up and not down. So now he's on his rack, so he can take his safety off. And notice too, he has his climbing gear on as he's descending. And that's sometimes if you go in a pit, maybe you don't know how deep it is, or maybe you get down halfway and you find out the cave's got 10 feet of water in it. You need to change over, and that way he can just lock off and change over and be able to climb back out while he's on the rope.
So Marion, tell us a little bit about the size of this cave.
Well, and cavers do map caves, which is called cartography. So this particular cave has been mapped to be about 150 feet deep, which isn't really super deep, and probably about 4 miles of passage. So that's another reason you'd want to go with some experienced cavers who know the cave, or else know how to go through the cave without being able to get lost.
What are the techniques you're using to keep from getting lost?
Well, there are a couple different things we can do. We can take little pieces of flagging tape and mark them, either tie a knot or mark them with a marker, number 1, 2, as you go further back. And that way, or you can also set up little rock cairns pointing the way out. And those are great because on your way back out of the cave, you can put the rocks back or pick up the tape, and you're not leaving anything in the cave. Because caves can be very mazy, lots of different passages going off different ways.
Well, this is pretty awesome in here. I can imagine on a summer day this would be amazing, but it's so cool. But why did you guys really get into caving?
Well, I do it for the camaraderie. My husband actually got my daughter and I interested first in rock climbing, and then took us to our first wild cave. And I think it's like going to another planet. But what I love about it is the people that I've met, teamwork. We help each other. We're stepping on each other and shoving each other up a crack, trying to get through things, and just taking care of each other and laughing a lot. So,
how about you guys?
I got in it because I had a Girl Scout troop at the time, and Marion was with the Parks and Rec, and we had taken our troop several times with them, and then I just got hooked. But I actually like it for the challenge. Can I make it, through that tight hole, or can I climb up that ledge without whining?
Sign in, sign out, keep a record of the people who visit the cave.
So Marion, tell us about the features in this room.
Well, there are some beautiful, what we call speleothems, and that's just about any kind of formations you might want to see. We have some stalactites coming from the ceiling that have been broken off at some point and they're growing back. So you can see the tiny little soda straw with the drop of water there. And we're very careful not to touch any of that because we don't want to stop it from growing. We have a column over here. That's where a stalactite and a stalagmite join together. And down where you can see this beautiful white calcite, we call that moon milk. You can see some little rim pools, little pools of water. And sometimes in caves, they'll even form what are called cave pearls, kind of the same way a pearl will form in an oyster. A rock will rotate and get the calcite on it. And
What's causing it to rotate?
just when the water drops, it might hit that rock and spin it a little bit, so it's
Okay.
coating it with calcite. And in any cave, we don't want to touch anything, break anything, take anything. The only thing we would take out of a cave is ourselves and any kind of trash we might see left behind.
Now, a few of your guys have mentioned that this cave's exceptionally dry. What do you think is causing that?
Well, Virginia has been in a drought situation for about the past 3 years. So the cave is created by the water flowing through and picking up the minerals, and there just hasn't been any rain.
So now obviously we've got some writing and stuff on the rock here. What's going on?
Yeah, that's definitely vandalism. People have spray painted, sometimes scratched, put marks in, and again, caves are protected by the Virginia State Cave Law. There are fees for that, fines for that. I think it's $1,000 per infraction plus possible jail time.
Now you said this rock has an actual name. Or
Yeah, what kind of reminds us of the Titanic because it looks like the bow of a ship, and you have the stalagmites up at the front sitting on the bow going for a ride.
So Leonardo DiCaprio is up there hanging off the front right now.
Right, doing the flying thing.
And you guys use rock formations and shapes like this so you don't get lost in the cave.
Right, they can be great landmarks, and we'll say, oh, I remember the Titanic, and it was pointing this way. I remember the entrance is back that way, so kind of use it as a landmark. Right, this is a really neat formation because you have the soda straws that are very active. I just saw it drop, so they're growing. In general, you can say that calcite probably on average will grow about the end of my pinky in 100 years. So it takes a long time for these to grow. And this is falling on a stalagmite, and you can watch it and it'll kind of just drop right there in that little pit. Here's some popcorn. This is called cave popcorn. See little bumpy things? It almost looks like coral underground. And then another formation that you will sometimes see are called halectites, and that's where the soda straws and the stalactites grow kind of twisted. That one a little bit, yeah. Right up in here, they start going not straight down. They defy gravity, and no one's quite sure what causes them, but they're called halectites.
That was a really amazing experience. If people want to get into caving and learn more about it, what do they need to do?
Well, we have a local caving club called the Blue Ridge Grotto. It's part of the National Speleological Society, and you can access it or find out about it by looking at www.blueridgegrotto.com.
Great. And are there any organized trips that people could get involved with?
Yeah, we have through Roanoke City Parks and Recreation, we have beginner and intermediate trips. They can just check out the quarterly that comes out from Roanoke City Parks and Rec or call their phone number. So we have the gear and transportation. It's a very organized trip.
For an even tamer caving experience, there's also commercial opportunities nearby at Dixie Caverns, which is located near Salem, Virginia. Till next time, I'm Greg Harmon, and we'll see you on Inside the Outside. Is that good? All right, that's good.